Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives with José Barzola. Peacebuilding Initiatives are collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships via dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and exploring ways to shift our own perspective to build compassion and empathy within our communities. Thank you for joining us today. Our conversation today is about peace in the Pu'unawai. On today's episode, we will learn about Aunty Kehau's multi-generational commitment to the Aina. She's one of the main stewards of Local Iapa'au, together with Uncle Bruce Keaulani. We are here to build awareness of the ongoing effort to reconnect communities to the Pu'unawai and shoreline areas of the East Loch of Pu'uloa, known as Komoawa. Also, the intent is to restore, preserve, and protect bicultural Aina culturally connected spaces. Aunty Kehaulani Lum is a respected community advocate with deep ancestral ties to Aiea as a descendant of Native Hawaiian stewards of Awalau o Pu'uloa, Mikalemi, and his wife Ka Iliahi. Aunty Kehau has dedicated her life to serving and uplifting her community. She has been instrumental in the co-stewardship of the reclamation, restoration, and protection of Aiau, alongside Uncle Bruce Keaulani. In addition to this vital cultural work, she serves as president of the Bernice Pauahi Civic Club and sits on the boards of both the Living Life Foundation and the Aiea Community Association. This year, Kaʻōlinokaimana supported Aunty Kehau in writing testimony and testifying to ensure that biocultural spaces were prioritized in the urban planning document that is being updated as a guide for those who are attempting to expand development, especially high-rise type development beyond Waikiki and Ka'aka'ako and from Kahala to Pearl City. At risk, however, is that spaces and places that are not now recognized for its ecological and cultural values will face devastating impacts. A little bit about Kaʻōlinokaimana, who is a passionate place-based STREAM plus J, which stands for Science, Technology, Reading, Engineering, Arts, Math, plus Justice educator. She believes deeply in the power of education to cultivate future Malama Aina leaders, those dedicated to reclaiming indigenous narratives and restoring sites, essential to the health, well-being, wellness, and the biodiversity of thriving ecosystems. With this vision at heart, she devotes her life to uplifting the kupuna of Hawaii, the Aina itself, whether through supporting Haumana in building deep Palina relationships to place, working hands-on in the Loi or Loi'ia, or drafting powerful testimony. She remains fully committed to the transformation and healing of land, people, and story. Also joining us today is Andrew J. Lewis, who is the writer of the article Care of Honolulu's Freshwater Springs, a Shared Responsibility, that was in Civil Beat. He has been supportive of this biocultural site preservation effort. Andrew is a PhD candidate in the Department of Geography and Environment at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. His research explores the intersection of hydrogeology, biocultural resource stewardship, and political ecology, with a particular focus on the cultural and ecological significance of freshwater springs. Lastly, joining us is Ati Jeffers-Fabro, who was born and raised on Oahu. He's a lifelong conservationist with over 30 years of experience in biocultural restoration, environmental education, a true keiki o ka aina, a child of the land. Ati has dedicated his life to exploring what it means to malama aina, or care for the land, in both thought and action. His journey has taken him from roles in an environmental educator and education director at the Hawaii Natural Center to wetland coordinator with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, managing sanctuaries across the island. Today, Ati serves as community planner, using his deep well of knowledge and lived experience to empower local communities in protecting and restoring Hawaii's Aina land and water. Ati's advocating for the restoration of Makalapa Park across the Emerald's Boathouse in Kalawa. Ati's work is grounded in hope that By reconnecting people to place, we can preserve the essence of our island home for generations to come. The aina that we are working to preserve are closely connected to the wai and the kai. The restoration of the ecosystems highlight how they not only bring healing to the aina, but also the people who work collectively together and to the native flora and fauna. And with that, I thank you all for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Aunty Kehau to lead us in an oli. Just gotta unmute. There you go. Thank you.
Akahai me kalokai, olu olu me kaha'a, ahonui me ke aloha, aloha ina mamoa pau, aloha ina mamoa pau, he ingoa no nā pua o ali I Pauahi. Aloha.
Thank you. Thank you for setting place, setting intention, and for all you just being here today. And it's really just an honor to share this space with you all today. So thank you. To get us started, we are going to talk first to Andrew, who was the writer of the article, Care of Honolulu's Freshwater Springs, a Shared Responsibility. Andrew, thank you so much for being here with us today. I was wondering if you can help us get started with some background knowledge on the situation at hand.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm very honored to be with this group of people. I feel like a little out of place with some heavy hitters here, but yeah, really thankful to be here. I think one of the ways we can start is by thinking about this quote we have from Mary Kavana. And so I'll start reading that, and then I'll talk about some of the hydrogeology background that comes with that, and then I think Aunty Kehau is going to finish up the quote and explaining that for us. So the quote starts with, the Hawaiian word for water is vai. The Hawaiian word for wealth is vai vai. So vai doubled or said twice. When you have vai in your life, the ability to sustain yourself upon the land, and the water was believed to be from the god Kane, Kane the giver of the water of life. So this Hawaiian word for spring is Pu'unawai, or Pu'unawai, described as a place where water bubbles up from the ground, rising like a hill or a mound. It is the source of water. So I love how deeply Hawaiian place-based knowledge so perfectly aligns with the science behind groundwater. The word Pu'unawai, as Mary Kavana Hukia reminds us, isn't just a spring in the physical sense. It's a source, it's the beginning, it's the bubbling up of life from within the land. So just as some background about groundwater and water on Oahu. So we have an aquifer on the island, which is an underground reservoir of fresh water. When it rains up Mauka, up in the mountains, the water seeps into the ground and forms this aquifer. On Oahu, it's very important because 90% of our drinking water comes from this groundwater reservoir or aquifer. Springs, which we're going to be talking about today, are these natural points where the water discharges. And springs form differently across Oahu because of the geology and their uses and their threats, and their vulnerability are also different on different parts of the islands. Springs can come up near the ocean coastline or underneath a submarine groundwater discharge. They can also happen up Mauka in the high level areas in these vertical compartments that were created by lava flows. And they can also happen in perch settings. So a layer of ash from the volcanic eruption, water can get trapped on top of it and a spring can form. Lastly, there's springs that can form in the freshwater lens. And this is where we really see the pressure of the aquifer and the magnitude of the power of this vai. And this is when the water is forced and bubbling up this cold, fresh groundwater that these springs not only have, cultural and ecological values, but they're really amazing hydrogeologic formations as well. And it's really amazing to go to places like Ewa, for example, where we have you can really see the power of the water bursting up, and it's really beautiful. Circling back to the quote and this concept of springs and water as wealth. Like I mentioned earlier, on Oahu, 90% of our drinking water comes from groundwater. And springs, as these natural points of discharge, offer a glimpse into this hidden system beneath our feet. They're a window. When we look at a spring, we're seeing this kind of window into the aquifer. And this is widely across different cultures. Some indigenous communities actually call springs eyes into the earth. And I think this metaphor really holds true here in Hawaii as well. So springs are a wealth of not only a wealth in terms of it's where we get our drinking water, but it's also a source of knowledge and a wealth of knowledge for how we're mismanaging or managing water resources. If a spring starts to dry up, or its salinity increases, or it's contaminated with something, that's a wealth of knowledge, and it's maybe telling us we're pumping too much, or maybe there's contamination from a landfill, or maybe land use change is disrupting its flow. So that's one of the reasons, hydrologically why springs are very important. But springs aren't just this physical phenomenon, they're also places of cultural memory, ecological richness, and community practice. They're places where stories are told and people gather to malama aina through working in lo'i or loko'ia. There's countless work days around the island and around all the Hawaiian Islands where you can go work in these spring-fed lo'i kalo or loko'ia settings and really connect with each other as well as the land. So there are these hotspots of ecological diversity, of geologic fascination, and also social building and well-being. And so as we develop and as we live in this urbanized setting, we have to consider these hydrologic and ecological values. So what we might call biocultural, I think, is going to be one of the main themes today, and the importance of springs, which I think Aunty Kehau is going to talk about the more cultural and social aspects and importance of springs.
Thank you, Andrew, for setting the stage. Some of the good work. Might you share a little bit about how you're I see that your work is intimately connected to the why. And as a hydrologist, could you share us about your work and how it connects to restoration and protection of the why?
Yeah, I would say it's hard to put so I think springs are my deal, and I do physical and social science work around it. So some days I'm the hydrologist, some days I'm the social science person. It depends on the crowd and what expertise I need to try to bring. But yeah, so the work that we're doing, some of the social work that we're doing is trying to get springs, ensure their protection within Hawaii's state policy and water frameworks, right? So we have the Water Resource Protection Plan, we have the Public Trust Doctrine, which acknowledges springs and groundwater as important sources of ecological and cultural significance that need to be protected. But when it comes to enforcing those protections on paper, there's a lot of issues. There's aspects of springs, right, or when groundwater comes to the surface. So some managers refer to springs as groundwater, while some refer to them as surface water, which really creates a disconnect in who or how the resource gets managed. So part of my work is understanding the policies around water management and how springs can be incorporated within Hawaii's specific context. Some of the other work that I'm doing is is simply going around and talking with spring stewards around the island of Oahu and understanding the vulnerability and threat. So just having talk story sessions at work days and getting to know the different springs and the threats and the management and monitoring issues that are happening and needs. Another thing that we're working on is restoration framework. So going to all these different restoration sites and building a framework for how these systems can be managed. So one of the ways we gathered all this data from different case study restoration sites around the island and created this framework the framework's in the design of Uhahumu Puhaku, which is the rock weaving, Native Hawaiian rock weaving, which usually happens at springs as well. So we have these framework elements like monitoring and restoration of cultural practices and building stewardship plans in the design of the different pohaku that make up the pa or the wall. And so these culturally approachable frameworks for the work that we do is really important, right? We're not just, I think it's important to communicate the science that we do in ways that are accessible to people that it's not just other academics are going to read, right? So that's a really important part of our work. So that's the restoration part. Another thing is starting to monitor some of these springs. Specifically right now we're working in the Ewa region. So we have 3 different spring-fed lo'i kalo that are being monitored for water level, water salinity, and water temperature. So temperature is a really important component that stewards talk to us about, that the cold water is important for certain varieties of kalo. The salinity, right? Kalo has a threshold for the amount of salt water. And the reason these things are changing is because we're building on the landscape and we're developing the landscape and we're altering these natural flow patterns. And we're also pumping groundwater. So, right, when we pump groundwater, it allows the level in that aquifer, that reservoir underground, goes down, which allows for seawater to infiltrate in. So especially in the basal area, we have these natural springs that were really supporting the abundance of Ewa, right? And now they're getting saltier and less productive for fish pond and lo'i cultivation. So all these are simple measurements we can take. We can stick a sensor in there, and we can work with the stewards to understand which way is best to monitor this site. But it's hopefully going to be really useful information and not only helping practitioners in the area manage their springs, but also giving them data to go to policymakers and say, hey, we've had this sensor in the spring for a year and our salinity has gotten really, it's increased over this year. So it's a tool for people to go and talk to the managers and on how to protect these culturally important resources.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for providing us some solutions, getting a deeper insight into why this is happening. I think one thing I really love to ask folks is more on, I guess maybe on the personal side, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what brought you to be such connected to the Aina and caring for it. I know we all have our story, and I wonder if you might share a little bit about yours, because I find through storytelling, there's great power, and we might be able to reach our audience further to think about their own connection and appreciation and love for the Aina. Yeah, that's for you, Andrew. Yeah.
Okay.
The last question, promise.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, I'm not from Hawaii, and I never thought that I would be able to live here or live in a place that's so beautiful, but I got an opportunity to study here and continue my education. So I moved here, and the first thing I did to get myself acquainted with the island and the space and the culture is to start going to work days. And so I was able to be knee deep in lo'i mud, as a couple months right after I got here. And it's a connection for community building. And I moved here. When I moved here, it was the first time I was here. I moved here with a couple checked bags, got off the plane, and looked for a house. And so the work days and being with I worked with Springs previously, and I knew that's what I was going to continue to do. But the social connection and having a community right away at the work days was really, really important. And I've always loved the outdoors. For this, I lived in Arizona and got to work with Navajo and Hopi and indigenous tribes in northern Arizona around the Grand Canyon, and was connected to those spaces. And so it was really important for me moving here to connect to these spaces, which also happens to be my hobby and my research. And so I'm lucky in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing a little bit and opening up. I know many times it's easy to get into the weeds of the terminology and the work that we do. But I think being able to kind of, we're all human, and I think you bring a unique perspective of not being from Hawaii, and I can share that perspective as well. I also not originally from here, but also in my time here acknowledging the privilege that I have to be here, and an honor to be able to learn and carry on those lessons that are being brought to me by the Kanaka Maoli community, to it's like protecting the Aina, which many times we think of it as like yes, that do we really need to have a conversation about protecting our land, about land? But yes, we do, because it's not being done. And that's why we're here today. And so thank you. Um, I'm going to turn it over a little bit to Ati. Thank you so much for being with us today. And honestly, anyone, feel free to jump in whenever you like. I know Auntie Kehau has a couple words, but we're going to get to her shortly, or whenever she likes.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ati. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here today. And so I've read through your extensive work with education, the Malama Aina, as well as the deep connections you have made with the Aina. Might you share about some of the human interactions and consequences of our actions upon the Aina?
Yeah, thank and once again, echo the sentiment that I'm really honored to be here. Thank you for you know, respecting all of our opinions and our thoughts and wishes. So yeah, I am born and raised here. I'm not Hawaiian. I was my both my parents were immigrants from the Philippines. My father came over for the from the plantation. Um, but part of it, this type of stuff is an evolution. It's continuous, and for me, it started when we lived up on Round Top, which is above Makiki Manoa area. And in my childhood, I remember coming down from the mountain every day because um, everything was down in the lower area, and it was a pretty secluded area that we lived in. So I got to see the view plane of that southern shore, and particularly Ala Moana Waikiki side. And as we went through the years, I noticed our shoreline was disappearing. Um, I didn't think much of it. I just thought we don't see the shoreline anymore because of all the tall buildings that were being built. This was during the 60s and 70s. And, I lived life, went through high school and all, and ended up going to the Bay Area and living and work, studying and working. And, I had a lot of time to think about home and Hawaii and the things that were going on up there, back home, and realized, those things were happening. There was a reason. And, just that visual sight of the shoreline disappearing led on to thinking, what was happening in the islands, in the 70s, rampant development, asking for permit, not asking for permission, but asking for forgiveness later kind of attitude that these developers had. And, what to do about it. And I got into education. When I moved back, I started working with the Hawaii Nature Center. One of my goals was to try to connect people to see what they have here and bring them back, because already in the 90s we were so disconnected. Everyone was talking about, this technology taking people away from the land, and even back then and before then even. But we educating people was a real fun thing to do, very challenging, but at the kid level, we taught school children um, the concepts of our natural history in Hawaii are broken down so much that it's very digestible. And I just can't stop thinking about when parents came to field trip. They're the ones that got the most out of it, because the kids had gotten it all. They had to prep for, the field trip and all of this, so they knew it all. Parents come in cold; they're just chaperones. They hear all the knowledge that these kids were learning, and they'd always come up to me wanting to know more, but also saying, "I wish I had this as a kid." And that resonated with me because I kept hearing it over and over and over. To this day, I still hear that. I wish we had it as a kid. So it just tells us, that thirst for knowledge of our own place is missing. We need to have that. And there's so many ways to get that here. We're on an island. There's not much you can get away from. You can't just drive away and disappear into everything. You're always connected to something. And so the why, which Andrew was talking about, is key to everything here. In our discussion prior to us getting together, we talked about the high islands and how special it is for Hawaii to be here in the first place. High islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, that there's nothing like it. But along that comes with that is a whole fragile ecosystem that had to develop around that, and anything you do alters it. And so that was even before people. Now people came, and we've accelerated change here so quickly. It's when you understand how our islands got to be the way they were and how quickly we changed it, and not for the good, really. If you're talking about island ecosystem, then it's pause for concern. We need to understand, we need to see it, and we need to recognize, but most of all, we need to do something. And so I'm blessed to surround myself with a lot of folks that do something about it, but not nearly enough. There's so much more to be done. Going into the state and working with our wetland sanctuaries, I got introduced to a specific ecosystem, which are wetlands, and seeing how important they were. And my goal at that time was to really integrate these wetland sanctuaries into the fabric of the community that they was embedded in. I think that was key, not just to educate people, but also to give this a place so that people understand what it is. It's a fenced off, no access, for whatever reason they give you, and you know we have that all over our islands, military resorts, all kinds of stuff that fence it off from us. So being able to bring people onto those sanctuaries are important. We were able to um, fledge birds that never could fledge anywhere near those areas before, in Paiko Lagoon, Hala Groves in Pohala Marsh, and Kauai Nui in the Kahanaiki area, where cultural practice can take place, as well as stewardship. Those types of things um, make people not just participate, but understand the value of these special places. I got introduced to springs there, but throughout my career in conservation, I've seen springs up in the mountain, I've seen them in the lowlands, I've seen them at the wetlands. They're everywhere. They are almost a community builder, like Andrew was saying, because you don't have to make an auwai from a stream to get fresh water. The fresh water is right where you live. You centered your living around it, so you protect it. So these ethics were built around vai and the community, and I think we need to bring some of that back. But once again, we have to educate people, and they have to accept it, and they have to practice. So yeah, it's exhausting, as everyone here probably knows. The work that we do and we try to do. It's part of our lives. It's part of us. So I just, the hope and the wish is that people will have a fraction of that passion that we have, even just a fraction would go a long ways into helping us do what we do. So thanks. Yeah, and any other questions I can try to answer.
Thank you so much. I wonder if you talk about these fractions, and I wonder if you might offer some additional like, solutions or ways that we can make a positive difference on an everyday. What can we change? I mean, change is one of those challenging things that humans really don't like to hear because we love routine. But rest assured, one thing in life,
I
you
think I think a basic premise is water is to be shared. It's not to be taken away or you know inaccessible. There's water everywhere, and it might be on your property, but that water is connected to other bodies of water. It's happening all the time, like Andrew was saying, with development. The spring would be emptying out in here, but then there's a developer, a house upstream a little from the spring, and they will shut it off, and all of a sudden the whole function is gone. So yeah, having people understand the water and also work with it and their neighbors, I think is important. We've lost that sense of community.
thank you, thank you. Might you delve a little deeper into what connected you to the Aina and caring for it? I know you have a wealth of history in it, but I wonder if there was a certain portion of, when you were younger that you just that was a light bulb moment that you knew how important it was. Ati, that's for you. Yeah, it's okay. You got muted.
Okay, so you want about
About
I'm
you
sorry.
specifically, just wondering how did you initially get connected to the Aina and caring for it? I know you have a long history in it, but I wonder, was it something that happened at a young age? Was it, what inspired it?
I guess maybe some of the epiphany came when I trained to be an educator, an environmental educator here in Hawaii, and I had to learn the natural history, and that revealed to me how complex, intricate, and fragile this native ecosystem was, just the story of honey creepers, out of one pair or a pair or several pairs, but they were these honey creepers that had come. The only way things could get here is by wind, wings, or waves. The three W's. That's what we always taught kids. And so birds obviously came by wind, but also forest birds had to be brought in by something else. And so probably hurricanes, big storms that brought them over. Mating pair was able to colonize and live, and then they evolved and they formed I don't know how many different types of birds out of these honey creepers, but they took advantage of all the different niches. They filled seed eating, insect eating, nectar eating, all kinds of all these niches that other animals would be taking in a regular quote unquote ecosystem, like a continental ecosystem. Birds took all their places. The honey creepers were one. The Moanalo, which was a flightless duck, became the grazer. We didn't have any hoofed animals here, but we did have grazers, and these birds evolved to become wingless or vestigial wings, and they were the grazers. They're the one that ate all the seeds, and we had sea eagles here, and all sorts of forest birds. And then that's just the birds, but the plants and the insects that even came to support all of that was a system. And just thinking about that, it just boggles the mind, but also expands the imagination of what was here before. And then I was able to go to these actual places. Like I remember going to the Kamaka'o Preserve on Molokai. That's cloud forest. Cloud. If anyone ever never been to a cloud forest, that's some place that you should see, because that really you understand Hawaiian rainforests when you see the lichen and the moss and the ferns, and the ground is always, you're like walking on a sponge up there, because that's where the clouds gather. Those types of magical things just awakened my senses and all the things that happened before me to the point where I need to teach people about this. I need to, have them experience the same things. And in our urbanized society, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And we were doing it in Makiki Valley, and Makiki is the most densely populated part of Oahu. A lot of condos and walk-ups. That may have changed by now, but at the time when we were doing it, it was. And a lot of those folks didn't bother to look Mauka to find a beautiful trail system in the mountains that they could take advantage of. So we brought them there with education. But that was one of my experiences. But some of the others are, when I see the culture here and how the Hawaiian culture and how they, it was difficult at first. They had to alter land, but there was a need and a strive to bring harmony to place and people, and they were able to achieve it. I think from these islands in the Middle Pacific, they were able to feed almost 1 million people here at one point in time. That was mind-boggling. And then you dive deeper and watch the practice, and you see, not just the passion, but also the history, the knowledge, the resources that this all came from, and most of it was oral. We have all these writings, but so much I think still in the Hawaiian culture is oral. It gets passed down from family to family, and I hope that never goes away, because that's perpetuating the pureness of a culture. So yeah, those types of experiences solidified my journey here in a way, making it, this is my home, even though my ancestors came from somewhere else. But I feel like the practice and the living is where I belong. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope that some of that knowledge you just dropped inspires other folks to go into this field, because, I found everyone's gonna be looking up honey creepers and going down the trail of all the different birds that have come from that. So thank you so much for that. I wonder if
yeah.
you may also share, uh, do you find that there is interest in the community for protecting the biocultural spaces? I know you're doing some of this work, but just you also mentioned that there isn't so much. So just wondering, um,
I think there's an intrinsic need to do it. I think people want to. It's expressed in different ways, but also on the other hand, there's also the apathy and the disconnect on the other side of that, where people don't think twice about it. Um, I think people want to make their place better. They just don't know how. You give them an opportunity, like park cleanup or tree planting, plant swap, any kinds of activities that have them interact socially with nature is a good thing, I think. But that's also your platform. If the leader is a good leader, they can talk to people about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and um, maybe start to give some purpose to what we're trying to do, because people's purpose is totally different right now. What they think is important, what they want to put their energies towards, is different. um, and it's understandable, because we are bombarded with media constantly in our lives. We carry it around with it within our pockets, take it wherever we go. It's everywhere. But nature and all this around us is also there too.
yeah.
And if you stop and you pause, and that's why kilo is such a big part of, I think, what people can do to help themselves, especially on an island, is the observation. Just step outside and just breathe the air, look at the sky, feel the wind, listen to the birds. They're all telling you something, but put it in that context and it starts to mean something. So practicing, just different ways to look at things. So yeah, and I think people like the going to the service projects, but one of the things I like to stress is, you're coming from town all the way into windward side to help this side, but when you go back, go to your place and see what needs to be done there too, because things need to be done everywhere. Don't just come over here, do service project, and go back to your house and live normal again, because your place needs help too. So that's a message that we should all be giving to each other. Is place based, malamaina.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I wonder if you have any additional words to share regarding challenges to preserving the Wahipana and bicultural spaces. Um, it sounds as though people are very much focused on that warm, fuzzy feeling of doing something in the community, and and they feel like, okay, I've allotted, that 1 hour, 2 hours on a Saturday, and now I can go and be and just and so how do we shift, I guess, our perspective? How do we shift our lives and the work that we do on a daily basis from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, and how we interact with everyone in our lives and in nature specifically? Yeah, just wondering, I mean, you mentioned media, and I mean, we could talk about not to, there's capitalism, there's there's multiple levels. And so what do you do on an everyday basis to maybe lead by example and we can learn from you?
Yeah, I think it is starting with place. If you're gonna, if you even if you live in a condo or you're surrounded by buildings, that's something to notice, and that's something to, you know, shape your idea of what you want to live around. It's you all these tall buildings, and then you see a little patch of green there. Does that patch of green mean anything to you? You step outside, you look around, and then you live in the country in a rural area, and you have vast spaces, but you see it every day, and you take it for granted, because you got to go to work. You wake up before sunrise, and you don't come back till sunset, and you don't get to see that part of your world unless it's a weekend or whatever. But I think starting place based, always place based. That is your place, that's your home, and so however you look at it, whether it be good or bad, um, participate, do something there. I think that's helpful for folks, especially in densely populated areas. It's hard to create space for yourself outside. So you have to claim a bigger space, I guess, if you're looking outside, or you go somewhere else, which is what a lot of people do, for big space. So I think, yeah, just being aware of where you are, your space, and how it's being used. And if you need to do something, do something.
Thank you. Thank you so much for uh, those guiding words and wisdom and insights. Greatly appreciate you to be here with us today.
Sure. You're welcome.
I'm gonna turn over to Kaʻōlinokaimana, who I just want to thank so much, as she is truly the gatherer and that brought us all here today. And I very much appreciate you for that. And I wonder if you might share a little bit about your collaboration to support Aunty Kehau. And we talked about, I mentioned in the intro about writing testimony and testifying to ensure the biocultural spaces. If you can get us started, thank you.
Aloha kākou. So I am also very honored to be in this space with all of you. And thank you, Jose, for being so open to having us share today. Because I really feel like everyone in this space has important messages to share, lessons to share. So mahalo for this platform. The way I connected with Aunty Kehau is really her energy. Because you can go to a place, right, and you automatically feel a person's energy. She can probably share more about this, the philosophy of mai e ai. But mai e ai is the idea of like when any visitor comes, you offer them hospitality, you invite them in, and it was inviting them in to eat. When you go to aiau, it's really this space where you're invited in, and at all races, all ages, everyone just feels so welcomed. You feel enveloped by her aloha. It's such a deep and sincere aloha, and that is really what connected me to Aunty Kehau. I automatically kind of gravitate to people like that, and their energy just fires up my energy as well. So mahalo nui loa to Aunty Kehau, and to all of the the people that are at Aiau, you know, all of the work that they do is so selfless, and you know, just knowing the story. Like I really want Aunty Kehau to. I know she's going to share about Kalani Manuia and Kamoi Wahine that cares for this space Pu'uloa. But I really feel like that's such an integral story that can ground us here. But it's an example of when you do something for a space and you bring all of this wealth and abundance to the space through the pono use of vai, right? It's always, we have to always think about like how can we use the vai in a pono way. And what I always was inspired by for my first visit to Aloi. So I was a student of Haunani Bernardino, and she was one of the first stewards of Kapapalo'i o Kanewai in Manoa, at UH Manoa. And so she would invite us to the lo'i there. She would tell us mo'olelo about that space. But it was from that my first love grew, and my first understanding of how the vai works within a system like this, how it's all integrative. And I think what's so amazing about the lo'i, how the vai goes into the lo'i, it feeds the kalo in the lo'i. At the same time, it's biomediating, so it's removing anything that's can be negative in the water, but it's also filling the water with nutrients. And then it's never about just taking something. And that's something that I always felt so honored to learn about in Hawaiian culture. Is it's always about this reciprocity. So we're going to reuse the vai in the lo'i, but we always return it. We'll return it in better condition. And I know when we were growing up, that's something we always heard, right? When you use something, when you go to a space, always leave it in better condition than when you first saw it. And you can see this practice taking place within the lo'i. And so that's something that inspired me. And then to see the work that, if anyone goes to Pa'aiau or any of these spaces that are being cared for by the kupuna, by all these different makua that are caring for these spaces, and you hear the story of what it once was, you know, and all the hours and hours and hours of effort that had to go into making the space thrive again, you know, it's a true commitment. And so and I'll let Aunty Kehau, I'll share all about that, because it's been her caring of the aina is intergenerational, right? So she's going to talk about that. And kupuna was always critical to that. And I think that's why I really loved what Andrew was sharing about the kupuna and the importance of the kupuna and the puna in the word kupuna, and the ku of the standing of the kupuna, you know, as the caretakers of the vai, but really symbolically feeding everyone, right? The kupuna is at the top, feeding everyone else, right? Their knowledge is feeding all of us, their generational knowledge. And so this is something I look at when I see Aunty Kehaulani, is this idea of kupuna, a person whose knowledge has been from generation and generation and generation passed on to her. Another person that the reason why I'm actually in this space and still living in this space is there's Dr. Isabella Iona Abbott. She actually, the reason why she inspired me was I actually hated science before. So traditionally, when you go to like the DOE school, like the science that we learned was all like memorizing formulas and memorizing this and that, dates, and like all these scientists. And for me, that was like a disconnect. And seeing the grades I would get on my paper, I'd be like, oh yeah, this science thing is not for me. But when I took Dr. Isabella Iona Abbott's ethnobotany class, that wasn't really my first experience with kind of like this biocultural idea of combining culture and life sciences together. And that inspired me. I realized like, wow, but we're teaching science the wrong way to our students, to our homana. And when I became a teacher, I became committed to the idea of like, I'm not going to teach science in that way, because I actually want my students to embrace science, to love science, to see how it can fulfill our lives, and understanding how these ecosystems are interdependent and interconnected, and how that can hopefully inspire them to want to care for their place. So really everything that Ati was saying, everything that Andrew was saying, weaving all of that together is really important. And then from that, I see the kind of, when you see someone putting that much effort into caring for a space, right? When they put out a kahea, like a call, can you please kokua? Like, we need to do more to save our biocultural spaces. Of course, I immediately turned and was like, how can I help you, Aunty Kehau? Mahalo.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing a bit about the background here. And I kind of asked this question to other folks, but I wonder if you might share also about what connected you to the Aina and caring for it.
I think several things. When I was growing up, I was like a overly sensitive, emotional child. And the one thing that always made me feel better was looking at the Aina. Like, because I grew up in Manoa, there were always like lush trees. There was always the mist. There was always Pahala Opuna, her rainbow across the sky. And that always comforted me. I think that partly has to do with my own DNA, because my family immigrated from Japan, and there is a close connection that Japanese also share to their space and how they treat it and how they respect it. And so my father was also someone like that. He would always take us out. So I grew up in the 70s when we didn't stay in the house. When it was in the 70s, our ohana would always have us go outside, and you don't come back until it's dinner. And so because I know this is going to sound really weird, because maybe hopefully this doesn't happen anymore. But in my family, the boys were allowed to go on their bicycles and ride all around the neighborhood. But my sister and I, we had to stay within this certain boundary. But luckily, the boundary also expanded to our neighbor's yard. But being outside constantly, we would connect. We had all these trees in our yard, all these fruiting trees, mango, ohi'ai, oranges, tangerine, pomelo, just a wide array. And when you grow up in a way like that, where you're just always connecting to these different plants, I can't say that everyone is going to appreciate it, but I really had this great appreciation for all of the shade they provided, all the food they provided. And unfortunately, I do see a change in a shift in the community that I grew up, where a lot of people started cutting down their trees, unfortunately, and started like concreting it over. And so that's really something I was thinking about. Like, I hope that the generation that we're raising now, my daughter's generation, because they had all of these opportunities to connect to the Aina, I hope that they are going to be the ones that are planting the trees, planting the different plants, native plants for their place that can help their place to thrive again, because that's something that we really need today. And then finally, my mother, she didn't drive, so we would have to walk all over Manoa with her. She would take us, we had 4 children. So, and we were all kind of close together in age. So one of the things that I think she kind of found a resource was to take us to parks and just, have us run around, explore, and things like that. But I think because of that, that also helped me to connect to my place. Mahalo.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those memories. I greatly appreciate that.
Oh, actually, Jose, there was one other thing I wanted to say.
Yes.
It's also based on what Ati said, but about these devices that we have. Sometimes I get a little shocked because I see younger and younger children looking at devices. And I think the issue with that is, to any parents that might listen to this, or families that might be listening, even grandparents, once you give the child a device and you use that as like a kind of like a babysitter, it's so hard to take that away. I've witnessed like families trying to take it away from their child, and the child just starts throwing a tantrum, so they have to give it back. So don't get started with that. Like, one of my first son, who's now 33, he actually was one of those babies that were really, really difficult to raise, because every afternoon he would get kind of colicky, I guess they call it. So he would just have all these crying, crying, crying. So the one thing that always calmed him down was like taking him out, looking in nature, or also just singing him songs. So I would creatively like make up songs because I needed to, it's difficult to listen to a baby crying constantly. So I understand why parents do that. But how can we be innovative and creative and use our place, since we live in such a beautiful place with such beautiful weather? How can we use that place to be something that helps them to grow pilina to it? So like how Ati was saying kilo, right? Yesterday when I'm in Chicago right now. I was at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and this mother with a baby, she understood what she needed to do. She's taking her baby all over this rose garden. She's having the baby smell every single rose. Oh, don't you think that this rose is nutted? And she's giving the name, and she's like, oh, doesn't this rose smell so beautiful? And that is really what we need to do here in Hawaii. We need to be taking we live in a perfect place where we can have our children explore. There isn't really a lot of dangerous like snakes that we have to be careful of, or those kind of things. So how can we utilize that so that we can connect them at this young age? There's so much research out there that shows that is a way that really feeds a child's brain, creatively, socially, mentally, so that they can have total well-being. So mahalo, I just need to add that.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I wonder if you might share a little further about some of the interests and challenges that you've seen about protecting biocultural spaces uh, through the work that you've been doing.
Well, most recently, some of the challenges that I felt like I was facing was with this idea of affordable housing. So I do understand that we need to house. There's a lot of people that need housing. That there is, a lot of Hawaiians and people that have grown up here that are leaving Hawaii to try to find other places to live. But how can we all work collectively to think about how we can solve that issue without giving up our biocultural spaces, right? In conversation with Aunty Kehau, we were talking about how there are spaces now that are starting to open up. They have maybe like low rises on them, but there's plans for developing these huge developments on them, right? And when you think about those kind of developments going on those properties, right, they would discuss about how they would have to do pile driving deep into the bedrock, and what are going to be impacted by that. So I don't know if Andrew, I would love for Andrew to speak more about that, because there has been examples in Pu'uloa of damage to these underground water systems because of the rail development. But similar to the rail development, when you build these huge developments of multiple hundred units, that can also create similar issues. And sometimes when you go to testify or provide testimony, that's a lot of times the card that they throw, is, oh, don't you care about affordable housing? And I think what we need to understand is it can't be an either or. It can't be like, well, if we want affordable housing, we're just going to give up all our biocultural spaces, because then we lose so much. The water, we lose the chance, the opportunity to return these biocultural spaces to what they once were, these rich, thriving ecosystems that not only provided us humans a place, right? It provided the flora, the fauna, these interdependent native organisms a space to live. And I think the person that can speak the best to that would be Aunty Kehau.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mahalo.
So we're going to turn it over to Aunty Kehaulani Lum to bring us along. I know there are lots of times in the past hour where folks have turned to you for additional information and knowledge, and I truly am honored to have you here with us and with your wisdom and So in your love, as Kaʻōlinokaimana is sharing up. But yeah, if you can get us started, that'd be wonderful. I know your ancestors stewarded Loi Kalu lands in Aiea for several generations, all the way until your father's generation. Um, what stories were you told about the Pu'unawai growing up?
Yeah. First, I'm so humbled to be here. Thank you so much. Um, and I honor each one who has spoken. Whether you are of this Aina or not of this Aina, you are Hawaiian. And so grateful that you have chosen to do this work and that I get to be blessed to do it with you. So mahalo nui. I think you have a photo of my kupuna, and I appreciate Kaʻōlinokaimana for always reminding us of them. There's a photo that shows them, this would be maybe my great-grandparents' generation in Aiea. And
Getting it up right now. Let's see. Is it this one?
that's the one. And it's not very clear. I found it after my grandmother passed. It was in her chest. You know, they kept these chests and you never went to them when they were alive. And after she left, and they found them, and it's like a day where they obviously were in church or celebrating something. And that's representing 3 generations of them and my kupuna. And I was raised by 3 generations of kupuna. So when we all say that about where does this source come from, we have just stepped into the space that they occupied when they were on this planet. And that's what we all have to do, is to step into the space that they occupied when they were here and carry forth the lessons that they shared with us. And these kupuna are the ones who were of Aiea. My great grandfather and my great grandmother and great grandfather and my great grandmother, and then my grandmother as child. And my great grandmother on the right and the one on the left, I actually knew growing up. She signed the Ku'e petition. She was born before the overthrow and lived on Hawaii Island and came here and gave birth to my grandmother on the island of Moku'o'e'o in Ke'ehi, which is no longer there. But through Ka Iliahi, who's in the center with the white scarf around her, and Mikalemi, we were able to receive Aina in Aiea that has been stewarded before there was written private law for owning land. Right? They were just caring for this Aina, and it fed not only the Maka'ainana, but it fed the Ali'i as well. And then the one on the left, my great grandfather, who actually was a caretaker of the fishery in Ke'ehi, but came from Aiea, and through him we received this Aina, and that's his name was Silina or Kalina at birth, Green. Those are the kupuna who raised us and who dedicated themselves to caring for Aina and preserving Aina so that we could come down later on and have a place to be. So thank you so much for letting me bring them into the discussion, because they're with us every day. As you mentioned, I think it was Ati mentioning about how little is left in the writing, because it has only been a couple hundred years, right, of writing, and then the language also leaving, and now thanks to so many people returning again. And that's so true. You know, they didn't sit down and say, okay, this is how you do this, and you need to, do this, but they did it through their actions, and made great sacrifice. They lived very simply. They didn't have all that we have today, all the different diversions. They were very focused on sustaining ourselves, sustaining themselves, sustaining Aina. And they lived in a different frequency. They were extremely spiritual people, both in the traditional Hawaiian way and in the modern faith practices that came after kapu. And that drove them as well. So a lot of what we talk about when we mentioned about Pukui, and I love this, how she spoke about Pu'unawai in her interview from 1975 that we've been referring to, because we forget that, and how Hawaiians spoke so poetically, right? To say, today, if you ask somebody what is kupuna, they'll say, oh, senior citizen, or, an older person. But no, she says, no, the word kupuna, standing at the source, has a deeper meaning, even, that it's not just about the material wealth of the vai, but it's that they're standing there with the knowledge, handing that knowledge down to you that they receive from their kupuna, and expecting you then to hand it on to your descendants. So when we are alive today, we have ability to be in two. We are the receivers, right? We're the receivers, we're the descendants who receive these, but we're at the same time being the ancestors. Because if you only receive and you don't share it, or you don't activate it or apply it, then it leaves. And there is no ancestral memory passed down. And we don't realize that everything we're doing, we're actually in like this, walking parallel. Descendant and kupuna, descendant kupuna. So we all have that, no matter your age, or it isn't about whether you come from here, or who you are or what you have. It's what is what is running through you, the energy that is running through you. They start from your feet, enter your body, from the force of the aina, and all the way through you. For me, I didn't have a choice. Like I'm just fascinated by how everybody came to be connected by aina, because I did not have a choice. I was born and gifted a name by my grand aunt, my grandmother's aunt. My father wanted to name me after his great grandmother, the wife of my big grandpa there. Her name was Mahele Oiwi. Such a beautiful name, Mahele Oiwi, maybe referencing the splitting of the bones, a time when something was happening like that. And he was told by my great grandfather, no, you cannot name her that name. That's a kapu name. It's only meant for her. That's a lesson we don't all really know today, right? We look at our genealogy and we find a connection, and maybe we like the name, but we don't know whether that name was meant for everyone or just for that person. And so because he could not give me that, then he had to find another. But he didn't conceive the name, his kupuna conceived the name, right? It comes to them to give to the child. And so the name gifted to me, Kehaulani, was told to mean the heavenly dew, the dew that falls from the heaven and land on the earth and the plants, and then go down into feed what is coming forth. The Chinese name, because I also carry Chinese lineage of the Lum and Lim through my grandfather, it actually is a word that was named to a great ancestor over 2,000 years ago in China. He was born in a forest, the son of a person who Confucius said was the most ethical of his time. And when he was able to return to the kingdom, he was gifted that name by the emperor, and it means forest. So when you grow up with a name that is heavenly dew, forest, maybe not, it wasn't so much that I was told, you are heavenly dew forest and you have to do this. No, that's just who you are. And you grow into that name if you are listening, and if you have the opportunity, right, and the nourishment to become that name. And that's because kupuna, they made it possible. They were able to care for us. We had aina to live on. We had food to eat. We didn't want really for anything, and they made that possible. But today, very different time, right? We're living in a time of incredible scarcity without even realizing it. If we hear this all the time, that if the boats were to stop today, we would only have enough food for a few days. But we just hear that. And it's very true, right? So that means if we have to live on our own, how well would we do? How would we do? We had a taste of that when we went into COVID. And we were told we had to stay at home and we could only survive by what we could gather in our own ahupua'a. And that was kind of a vivid moment of realizing we cannot do well without impacting the lives of people around the world who we don't even know. Yeah. So the blessing that we have today in the work that all of us are able to share is that we have opportunity to restore what is still there, the little treasures that are still there, and just need aloha and attention and removal of what is not meant to be there. And then they return. And then they return. The animals return, the birds return, the fish return, the plants return. And then only after that can the people return. But without the vai, it would be very difficult. And we're seeing that now, right? We're suffering droughts and fires, no fresh water. It's all in front of our eyes. And it's very easy, I think, to be forlorn with what's happening, especially today in an environment where Aina is not being cherished, where it's being extracted. It's very difficult. But I say then that's when you have to work even harder. That's when you have to show up to these spaces even more regularly and give of yourself, because the term aloha aku, aloha mai, love given, love received, is exemplified when you go out. In one day, you can see the fruit of your labor and how it would be if you didn't come. So that's the kupuna. They're the most important ones. And if there's anything that I exemplify, it's due to them. And in fact, it's why I do the work that I do. I was blessed to be the eldest child. And so I was able to be raised by all of them. And they were all different. They were not all the same. Some were educators, some were welders, some were priests, some were hunters and fishermen. And they did different things, but the current that ran through all of them was their aloha. Whatever they did was their aloha. And I have an uncle who used to say, there's no aloha as sweet as that of the kupuna. They really mean it. In Pu'uloa, there was a kupuna. She was a relative of my grandmother, and she Arlene Eaton. And she's quoted a lot in her wisdom of having been raised in Pu'uloa. And one of the stories when Kaʻōlinokaimana talks about the feeding of people, there's a story that she told where as a child she was living with her grandmother and a stranger came to the house. And so she runs into the house and she says, "Grandma, there's a stranger here, a man who wants to see you." And so she goes up to him and she welcomes him and she invites him into the home. And she shares with him and she feeds him. And they spend a nice time together, and then he gets up and he's ready to leave. And after he has left, her grandmother says, "Tutu, why did you feed that man when you don't know him, when he's a stranger?" And Tutu says, "Oh," to her mo'opuna, "I did not feed the man. I was feeding the spirit in the man." The Aina does that to us. When we go and feed Aina, feed Aumakua, feed Mo'owahine, feed the kupuna, they return that to us. But we've been so disconnected, from, and I don't mean religious, I mean spirituality, so disconnected that we forget. It's ironic because all over the world, I know people who are Catholic practitioners and they go away and then this one man, Sam Luke, whenever he came back, he would give me a little bottle of water that he got from the spring at Lourdes or a spring at another place. All over the world are these places that people revere and cherish for their power, right? And they believe that water is magical and special and healing. And if you take just even a little bit of it, you will be healed. But we've been disconnected from that in our own Aina. We don't even know about Pu'unawai. I'm so grateful to Andrew for stepping forward and making that part of his work and putting it down, really bringing it forth to say, hey, we need to do something, right? And to Ati for all of his decades of reminding everyone that they're here, and to Kaʻōlino, who has that in her name already too, with the golden kaimana, the glowing light of kaimana. And you, Jose, I don't know your story, but I know you have a story connected to Aina too, right? Because that's why you're here. So when we come together, we're coming together, but we have all of them with us, right? And then we know at the end of this life, we have been good descendants and we have been powerful ancestors. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. And yes, I agree with everything you're saying. And yeah, I my connection to the Aina, um I mean, I think it's so my story for folks who brief history, I'm originally from Peru, immigrated at a young age, ended up on the East Coast, grew up on the East Coast and ended up in Hawaii about 10 years ago. Um, Different lands I've been on, but very respectful of each one that I've been on, for it's provided, it's cared, it's you talk about the spiritual, the ancestral knowledge, it's all there. I will say, yeah, I think Hawaii has a way of kind of awakening certain parts of our lives that we may have not taken notice of prior. Such as for myself, part of it's more like my indigeneity. I know it was there, but I didn't talk about it as much because it wasn't, it's rarely mentioned on the continent, on the East Coast. You know, Understanding how colonization lives on in our lives through blood quantums, and even when we identify ourselves as percentages, and how we're perpetuating the steps of colonization. So, yeah, so just being that consciousness has been truly, I'm very thankful for my time here, and my ongoing journey. So, yeah, and I am so honored, honestly. I've said it already, to just be in the space with you all. And thank you for sharing about and bringing your ancestors into the space. It is ever so needed. Especially this day and age, we talked about technology and just all the white noise out there, and there's great comfort in knowing that we are not alone, that there's there's a village, and being able to know and acknowledge that village that has, led us this far, and building upon your village to for the causes and the passions that we have, to the activism, the advocacy that we need to do to preserve for future generations, because we too become the village of our keiki, and how important that is to preserve for the future so that others can hopefully one day not have to have these conversations, because it is a mute point and it's like, yeah, we get it. So thank you. I A few more questions here.
Something.
Yes,
Is that
please.
where you are from? Is that near the place called Machu Picchu?
Machu Picchu is in Cusco. It's part of Peru. It's more in the mountains. I was born in Lima, but my ancestors do come from the mountains. And part of my ancestry is the Quechua, sometimes known as the Incas. But the historical correction is Inca is really just the one leader, the son of the sun. While the people were called the Quechuas, and they spoke Quechua, and their language was their historical. Now I'm going to get into a bit of a historical, but they use the Kipu system to keep their histories, which till this day has not been deciphered. The Kipu is basically a whole bunch of strings with knots, and that's how they kept history of their stories. Until this day, no technology has quite figured out what are those stories, but there's a lot of beautiful places like Machu Picchu that were created that all they can do is speculate on how, such a large kingdom was built up high in the mountains with big boulders.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because Aiau, the local i'a that the Navy invited us to come and restore with them 14 years ago, right? In Pu'uloa, was built by Kalani Manuia. That's who was the mo'i wahine. She was only the second mo'i wahine of Oahu. Her mother was the first. Her name is Hukani Loko. And Kalani Manuia, when it became her time to govern, she moved to Kalawao, which people call Aiea, but it's really its own ahupua'a, Kalawao. And she built the fish ponds. And she lived in the time of the habitation of Machu Picchu. So if you thought there wasn't a connection to you and there, an ancestor and there, well, then now you know.
Thank you. Thank you for building that bridge. And
How
that's
did they do that? They were doing similar work, right? With the materials that they had available
yeah.
to them for the same purpose, for survival at the same time.
Wow.
And she did that. And she extended the farming into the ocean to create the local i'a. And she said to the people, go build more. Go build more. She's the great-great-granddaughter of a chief named Mailiku Kahi. But even to hear you say kipu, that's like, wow. And akacord, wow. I mean, there's like something there, right? So her great-great-grandfather is the person who really had to contend with scarcity. He created the system that we call ahupua'a when he was on Oahu. And we had been, I guess, living along the coastal areas mainly, right? Bawakua is for the gods and the special things, kula for the loi, but they were living along the shoreline, and I guess there was just too much scarcity. So he created these systems where you could go and you live in each other. That was her great-great-grandfather, right? Comes down to her time, and it begins building fish ponds, which are also called aina, by the way. It's that which feeds you. So the water or the land is called aina. And she did that. And she brought in, though, in order to do that, her husband, who was a chief from Maui. Her father was a chief from Maui. And her husband, his name was Lupe Kapukeaho Makali'i, and he was known to be a farmer. I can tell you everything about her in 2 paragraphs. Lili Kala wrote a beautiful book about Manawahine, and she talks about her in there. But she lived so long ago, right? 200, 300 years before we started to write things down. And she's the highest sovereign. So maybe her stories are not, like the Gutenberg changed the Bible, maybe the same for our mo'i, right? They weren't for everybody to have. And but she did that. And so we have this opportunity not only to restore the vai and the aina and bring back the fish, but we have an opportunity to continue her legacy. I mean, it's still there. It had come in 80 years since the time that the people were moved off after the bombing of Pu'uloa. It had become a mangrove forest and was almost entirely mangrove when the Navy invited us in. But today, when you go, because of the beloved community of thousands and thousands of volunteers, none of us, when we all commit to do this work together and bringing their aloha, now you can see the silt where the mangrove used to be. And in a year or so, the silt's going to be removed because the Navy is going to take it out. And we'll have the wall restored that she built, and we'll have the oysters reintroduced and the limu introduced. When she chose this spot, I imagine the fish must have been leaping and the birds are filling the sky, right? Because why would you choose a place for your pond if it wasn't like that? She's the queen of Oahu. She builds 3 of them. So she had about 40 acres or so of fish ponds. And some were for bait fish, so they could go into the ocean and catch the aku, come back and feed hundreds of people. Some were for her own family in use. But she did this, and it's phenomenal because she was a female ruler at the time of Machu Picchu doing this. But I also found out that her first cousin is from Maui, a chief named Pi'ilani. And we hear a lot about him today because he honored the mo'o Akua Wahine, who was his daughter, named Kiha Wahine. And we hear about that a lot now as Mokuhinia is being restored. they're first cousins. So I suppose there was a rainbow connecting Mokuhinia to Pu'uloa because they were all doing this work. So the ideas that we have, we were separate and we did our own thing and it came from ourselves. No, I don't think so. Maybe somebody went to Peru. Maybe Peru came here. Who knows? Right? The same can be said for Norway, by the way, because I went there and they stack rocks too in water. Right? There's so many similarities. This is the beauty when you do the restoration. Not only are we saving the space and creating places for Humulipo to be restored, right? Humulipo, the animals to return, but we connect intimately with our own history and our own amazing leaders who we never got to know about before. And when you know your ancestors and you follow your ancestors, you not only, the blessing is then you don't have to follow someone else's because they're sharing it for you. And then they become all of our ancestors because we all jump in there. And Hawaiians are excellent at hanai, right? And we all jump in there and we're all doing it together. I'm so sorry that, and I understand why, but I'm so sorry that that people have to say that I am not from here. I am not born here. My ancestors are not from here. Because I was raised by kupuna who only had aloha. And the aina, it does not distinguish. Yeah. They just only distinguish at heart. So that's where peace comes in. Right? And Andrew said something earlier when we were talking, and he quoted something that the Dalai Lama said, that peace is not the absence of violence. Peace is the manifestation of compassion. That's aloha, grace, unity, pleasantness, humility, patience. That's compassion. So when we cultivate aloha, wherever we are, we're in the space of peace. We are ourselves in the space of peace. And that can only then radiate and reflect to everything around us, human and non-human, living and living in another realm. Yeah. Thank you for letting us create that space today.
Thank you for nourishing it. And it just reminds me of how I always say that the more, if people just take time to talk to each other, they'll start realizing how much they actually have in common, as opposed to just going off of our preconceived judgments. And yeah, thank you for centering it around, yeah, compassion, empathy. I mean, that's once we start talking to each other, that's how we build community. That's how we get to know each other. We're less likely to, you know, go to an all-out conflict with someone who we're connected to. We'd want to continue to talk about some indifference we may have and find some common ground to move along together. So thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for
thank
the work you
you.
continue to do. I I know we had some questions, so well and we have some slides, and you just let me know when you want me to share them.
Well,
Going
I'd
back,
like to just talk a little bit,
yeah,
and
please.
then let everybody else talk some more because I love learning from them too. If I
Okay.
may, if
Yes,
it's, I mean, if you
the
want to
floor
ask
is
one of the
yours. Take it
questions, then
away.
you can ask the question and then I'll answer it. Or what I'd like to do is bring my daughter into the conversation because she's the next generation of stewardship, and she's currently teaching. She graduated a couple months ago with her master's at Berkeley in landscape architecture and urban planning. And her thesis was about restoring sacred spaces in Ahupua'a, and in particular, Kalawao and Aiea. So she took what we've been doing for the last 12 years and what she was a part of, and she's applied it in her studies. Her undergraduate capstone in the fish pond, and then her thesis now in what is still present in our Ahupua'a that can be restored. Maybe it doesn't seem like it can be fully done now, but if we should remember that they were here, and when opportunity comes, maybe we can restore them. So as she was getting ready to complete the last semester of her studies, one of the places that she identified was this lo'ikalo, and I don't know if you have an image of it, but was a lo'ikalo that my grandparents received from Ka Iliahi and Grandpa Green, and it was about almost 3 acres. I think it was over 2 acres, and it should see a big picture and it's green. Yeah, that's the one behind me. You can kind of see that's the one behind me. But oh, this is a good picture. This is Kalani Manuia. I'll describe this one first. This is an image that Harinani Ormi, the artist, conceived not necessarily of Kalani Manuia, but of a mo'i wahine in her time. And so we honor her. There was no photograph or anything like that of her now. So that's who came to her. And then this aerial is a shot of where we are in the 1940s when it was still highly agrarian. You can look in the uplands now, and on the left side is where Pro Ridge Shopping Center and all of the houses are. And then on the right side was the sugar mill, and then now that's all Aiea, and then parts of Halava. And the stadium is just to the right of that loko'ia that's on the right side called Kahakupohaku. So this is how it was in my father's when he was growing up, and my grandfather, my great grandfather. In the foreground, you can see the loko'ia that we are stewarding with the Navy called Aiau. And then there's another one next to it called Opu. It has been filled in a lot already, probably with sugar cane. And then she had another pond. But you can see what is predominant in there is like, there's aina and there's vai. Aina and vai. And the fresh water is apparent in the springs, both in the fish ponds, even outside, have springs inside the harbor. And this is why this area was known in Kuali Ismele as the place you go to eat, because it was so abundant, right? As they went around the island, it's the place you go to eat. Today it's all developed, right? Most of it is developed. But to the right of this peninsula, you can kind of see it. It's a green area. That's where the Lo'ikalo was. The name of the land called Ma'ona, which is, my grandma said, it's the feeling you have when you're full. Ma'ona. And it had been in our family for many generations. And in the 1950s, there were no roads to go from above to down to the harbor. And people were still swimming in this water then, and fishing and getting food from it, gathering food to eat, limu and oysters and shellfish and everything. And they couldn't go down straight because there was no road. So they would typically cross through the Lo'ikalo area. I think there were over 20 lo'i in that area at that time from Mahele. And they'd cross over the lo'i on planks. And so people were allowed to cross over Aina and go down back and forth. Well, in the 1950s, which is after the war, but before statehood, there's a lot of energy shifting, right? We didn't have much happening during the war. Not much was coming in here, right? We were martial law. The supply chain was very, very challenged. And then now it starts to open up. So a sheriff came to my grandfather, who was in his 30s, and said to him, Mr. Lum, you know, people walk over the planks and go over your lo'ikalo to go to the harbor. And we're concerned that they might fall and drown in that lo'i. So you need to surround that whole parcel with a chain link fence or fence so they cannot come inside. And my grandfather had a job in the shipyard. He was a welder. At that time, my grandmother was caring for the children. And he said, I can't afford that. I don't have enough money to do that. So the sheriff said, okay, well then the city's going to condemn your I-9 and you're not going to have anything, which caused a lot of trauma, of course, for them. Eventually the sheriff comes back and says to him, okay, guess what? You don't have to put the fence around it if you sell it to my friend. And if you sell it to my friend, he'll give you some money and then you can go and then you've been compensated. And so feeling like they didn't have any other choice, they agreed. They were given about maybe, I don't know, a tenth of the value of the aina to leave. And that person had a salvage operation with a future mayor. He wasn't mayor yet, but that mayor had a salvage operation, and they filled in the lo'ikalo and put homes on top of it. And it stayed that way for many, many years. Well, in the last maybe 15 years or so, some investors came in and acquired the aina, and they tore the houses down. So for most of my daughter's memory here, she remembers it just being fallow. And she would hear the stories that my grandfather shared, and then I share that there used to be a spring there, and they came in and they had to cap the spring so that, but there used to be an auwai, and the oopu would flow through there. And he shared all of these stories and what they would feed and how they lived, and they'd feed the king and all of that. And she said, "Mommy, we're gonna get that lo'i back. One day we're gonna have that lo'i back." So as she was preparing for her last semester of the of her thesis, she called me and she said, "Mom, the owner has just submitted a permit request to build 8 houses on it. What do I do? Because this is my thesis. Do I have to go and find another spot to focus on?" And I said, "No, I think you have to stay there, because if you don't, you'll regret it. Right down the line, if something happens, we're here. We've been here for all these generations. We're not going anywhere. This is where we live. And so you will see that the rest of your life. You need to do something. And if you succeed, then that's wonderful. And if it goes where that's headed, then at least you know you tried." And so we actually started to apply her thesis before she even graduated by going to the city council to ask for. It happened that at that same time, the city council was considering the revised urban center plan, which they do every 10 years, and start to envision what development will be like in the community. And that was happening simultaneously. So we were able to go to Council Member Cordero's office and talk with her, talk to the chair and others, and ask for their support. And when I say they, it was the whole community. We put out the call, but the whole community stepped forward. Kaʻōlinokaimana came out. We had the Aiea Community Association, which we are part of, themselves stepped forward, and many of the members, people from Aiea and even all the way to Mauna Lua. I mean, so many people care. They really do care, but they just don't know what can they do, right? How can they overcome this? It just seems so insurmountable. And so that's where we were able to present 150 signatures on petitions that Kaʻōlinokaimana made at our Christmas fair. And I think she says that of all the people who signed that document, less than 2 asked if they could have more time. Everybody wanted to. This image right here is that picture that I took one day with the beautiful Anuenue coming down. And you can see that it's fallow now because it's been filled in. But there's a section in the center that is a darker green. And that darker green is actually a papyrus plant growing in water. There's a ditch still flowing through there, and it turns and goes towards the harbor, and it goes through an Hawaii system and feeds back into the stream that has been channelized and diverted since the 60s, I think, or maybe earlier. But the water is still flowing. There's fish inside there, and it's 5 feet above the surface of the stream. So there's this whole labyrinth. These are all the lo'i lands. There's still a labyrinth of maybe it's like how in Mo'ili'ili, where you have, tunnels where the water is still feeding through. And even you cap it, it's going to find a way. It's going to find a way. The 2 trees that I mentioned earlier to the left in the back are royal palms that my grandmother said her kupuna planted when King Kalakaua came and stopped here on his way to Honouli'uli. There was a bathing pond there that was sacred, now called Waiola'a. And he took a bath there, and he surely must have eaten from the land around this. And I'm sure that they fed him the kalo and the fish and everything that was available. This is the last of it. The last of that, any evidence of this system that was revered in the mele. But it's not too late, right? It's not too late. There are mechanisms now that the community came through. There is now language in that that bill. The city council passed it in April. The mayor signed it in May, and there's language now that allows for the city to invest and prioritize and invest in creation of biocultural spaces. And the language is what with Andrew and his and people from the university and friends help us to actually create this language that says that it's to prioritize and invest in biocultural restoration, Native Hawaiian lo'ikalo, loko'i'a mala, etc., in Lower Aiea to foster community health and well-being through an adaptive strategy that addresses stormwater management and groundwater recharge, mitigates fire risk, flooding, urban heat island, and other climate change shoreline impacts, while also expanding urban greening, cultural restoration, food security, and community stewardship. We have walked around the community of people who live there to see how they think, what they think about this, and we have not had anybody say, I think it's a bad idea. In fact, the kupuna down there said, we would love to be there at sunset as the young people are planting the kalo or doing what they want to do and be there together. So this is a space that the young people have asked us to do, to allow them to restore. It's through them that this is going to happen. And it's for them to be able to, maybe at an age younger than I was able to, start honoring their descendants who are coming forward. Right? They're still in their 20s and they can do this. But we have to help. There's a lot more work that has to happen. We have to find the owner for the land and they have to be willing to sell it so that we can access structurally donations that can come from the city, the state, other people. We've connected with different land trusts, like the Trust for Public Land or HILT, and asked them if they might be able to help us when the time is right. So there's a lot of work yet to do, but we're grateful to people like Chris at Kanevai, who has walked through this before and who was one of the first to come immediately and say, Aunty Kehau, you have the mo'olelo, there's Yaina, you have to do this, right? So it's really not me. When I know I get a lot of credit for this, but it's really not me. I'm the one with the vessel holding the water saying, come on, let's go. Let's all do this. And we're all carrying that water. Yeah, so thank you for letting us bring this forward as an example of how everyone can get involved in their own communities, in their own ahupua'a. Find the punabai. Find where they are. And if you don't know where they are, call Andrew and he'll help you, right? Help you, or Ati can help you too. And we'll help, but find these spaces that are really the treasures before it's too late, before they no longer exist. And the wealth that our kupuna left to us is totally depleted. Yeah. Ma'ona.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
about the wonderful work. Well, what an amazing that your daughter is continuing this. It's talk about inspiring, hopeful, next generation. And we hope that that is, big changes will come. And I think, yeah, presenting the topics in other spaces in academia, where sometimes there might be a disconnect with the stories of the community. I think
Mhm.
so. She's doing creating that bridge right there, which is just amazing. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And she's been carried by many. So just
It,
like all of us. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. Um, I I don't know if there's I know I didn't get to all your slides, and if there's more that you would love to share, I want to create the space here for that. I also just want to maybe you can share a little bit about you did a little bit of shared a little bit about this already, but what can people do in their own ahupuas? I mean, I know it's like go reach out to Andrew, go reach out to Auntie Kehau. Um, but what would be the first step? I mean, is it reaching out to you all? Is it looking at, Ati talked about looking at everyday routine, and how can we change that? I guess there's multiple steps that we can go about it. So I just want to see if or you might.
Can we,
Yeah.
could I bring in my daughter to share it? Because she has like a little thing that she can share about the small things that we can do and how everything makes a difference. Are you folks okay with that?
Yeah.
All are welcome here.
Yeah. The words are right there. Thank you.
Oh, aloha.
Thank you.
So basically, there's a lot of things you can do to help the Aina, basically. So when you can do policy, you can like go to your local government and you can talk to the officials, you can write like laws, you can be like an environmental lawyer, you can do protests, you can do like outreach events. You can do you can be aware of like your carbon footprint, like, oh, I need to use less plastic, or choosing to like walk or take transit instead of like using cars, or like taking or like eating less meat, or just eating no meat at all. Because using less water, and like use like not like giving into fast fashion, and being very like aware of like the little things that you do and the way that society is, to not be also like eating less out and like more cooking, and like supporting like local business, because like again, when you ship things, that takes energy or like fossil fuels from the boats. But if you do it like locally, it doesn't have to travel as far to get to you, and like the packaging doesn't always like you think, you don't really think about the packaging, but the packaging is really really bad. Anyways,
Just say mahalo.
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 Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, that was Kalia, and she's 16. She's gonna be a junior this year in high school.
Thank you. That's inspiring on so many levels. And yeah, that's I just did see her note, but I'm glad that she was comfortable enough coming on board and sharing a little bit further. But I want to just overall just provide the space before we close out. If anybody else here wants to add anything additionally, I know we can continue talking for a couple more hours, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time as well. But yeah, just anything else that anyone would love to add to today's conversation?
I'd like to add to that. We talked about how to get this generation motivated, and we always talk about academic ways, educational ways, but there's so many also artistic ways. And the group asked me to bring up my son, who has a band that is performing this Saturday, and they're a Hawaiian reggae band, and they wanted to perform for the community and have a free concert for North Shore to come. And it morphed into more a vehicle for a message, as they see the things going on around them, like the proposed gondola going up to Mount Ka'ala, which is huge and impactful. And I don't even know how they can conceive of something like that, but they have, and they're proposing something like that. Development, rampant development that is starting to happen here on the North Shore, where you come pop over on the windy road in Kaʻōlinokaimana, and you have this big, beautiful open space where I don't know how many people tell me they can breathe again when they see that coming out of Honolulu. That is at risk. So they are using it as a platform to inform people about these things that are going on in our community, and not just to be aware, but also to do something. It can take many, many forms of participation, not just getting your hands dirty, although that's the best way. But to motivate each other, you have to infiltrate their own likes and wishes and the things that they like to do. And they're the only ones that can do that. So I think, when we provide that example, like Kehau said, kupuna and the mauka, the makuas, we are responsible for that because we also had a hand in bringing us to this situation that we're in as well. And so, good and bad, it sits on our shoulders, and to get not just the next generation to help us, but also to understand how we got here, so that they can make good decisions, not just because we did it. That's not the only reason. Understand how we got here. So yeah, art, science, just like um, Kaʻōlino was saying, it's integrated. Everything connects to each other, and I think living lives as a whole like that gives us more meaning.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing about how your son and his friends are using music to create advocacy, create awareness. That's amazing. So what we're learning today is that there's multiple ways to go about it. It's just a matter of doing something, and showing up is ever so important for what you care and what you're passionate about. Um, well, I don't know if Auntie, if you have any final words before I close out.
Oh, I wonder if Andrew has the last something
Oh,
to add,
oh,
because
Andrew,
he talked up like 2 hours ago.
come on, Andrew. Welcome back.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Aunty Kehau for that beautiful story about her ancestral land. And unfortunately, examples like this, thinking of biocultural spaces are it's happened all over, right? Even when you go to, I love Waikiki, right? Means spouting water, and that whole area now is not spouting with water, right? It's spouting with big development, and that was a place that was very lush and green and had a lot of water. And then the Alawai Canal was built, and just like Aunty Kehau's story, that the Alawai Canal not only drains the springs and the Pu'unawai around it, but the fill was used, like her example, to cover up the persistent springs that are coming through. And I think one reminder that we have to have is, the water. Somebody said earlier, the water is going to find a way in these spaces. The Aina is resilient, and the Waikiki hotel basements flood, right? There's resilience of the Aina, so we need to care for and steward those spaces. And there's always a cause, there's always something we can work on, and there's I've lived in other places, and I've never Hawaii is so unique in the small community groups that are really making huge differences. So there's no excuse to kind of ignore all these different groups that have work days or signing petitions or submitting testimony. I think there are a lot of options, and if you go to these work days and you talk to people, and everyone has a story and everyone has something that they will share with you about how you can get involved. And I think Aunty Kehau said it to me one of the first times I was at Aiau, and talking about kuleana, and she's like, okay, now you know about this space, now you know about this problem. And so it's like a seed, and she didn't say it in a way that this kuleana to care is a burden, but it's, you have knowledge of the space and the knowledge of this if it was degradation of a spring or something, and you have that responsibility in whatever shape or form to work at righting that wrong. So I think that's a very important quote that I got from Aunty Kehau.
Thank you. Thank you. If it's okay, I just wanted to add one thing.
Most definitely. You don't even have to ask. You're more than
Sorry.
welcome
Um,
to.
before we're done, I just wanted to also say that when we started with Aiau, my uncle Ka Iliahi from Maui had told me when I was younger, if you're going to do a project, build an ahu and seal your intention in where you headed. Honor your ancestors. Honor the ancestral deities who our ancestors honored when they were creating space. And that's what we have done at Pa'ayao and in many places that are being stewarded are doing that. I think you cannot recreate a system only physically because the mana from the kupuna before was spiritual. So you, as much as we can, go back to that. Make the offerings. We don't know what they offered, but come with from fullest, purest heart to honor them and to seek their aloha and their support. And do it regularly until it's so natural for you that it's not an effort. It's so natural to honor them because that is the energizing force. When we step into that same space, so Ha'ayau, the Mo'o'akua Wahine, known as Kane Kua'ana, is who is credited with bringing all the abundance of the fishery. And we honor her and all the ancestors, Keakua, everyone who comes. When we started at the pond, I found writing there were only about 5 species of fish inside there that were noted. Today, thanks to everyone's aloha and the blessings of the Akua and the Mo'akua, there are over 35, including endangered species. And all we have done is remove what's not supposed to be there. Rebuild a wall, come together in aloha. Come together in aloha. That's, and we, it's so, it's been 10 years, 12 years, something like that. And they return. And when you sit there and you see the animals come back, the birds return, the auku'u return, the aiau return, the kolea return, the spotted eagle ray, hihimanu, return to a place that their ancestors came to before. There's no greater gift you can leave, right? The kumulipo was left to us by Lili'uokalani. It's one of the chants that she created, she translated from the Hawaiian language that had been written during King Kalakaua's time. And while she was in prison, it's one of the things that she did is she translated that, and she writes in her foreword that it gave her much pleasure to do this. She left us a message in there. That's what that was. I think she couldn't be very overt in whatever she wanted to write. And she says she hopes that in the future, this gives the learned people or scientist people as much pleasure as she derived from it. And it starts with the coral polyp being activated by the light coming into the dark, and all of the animals and the plants guarding the animals that are created over 7 era before the human being walks in. So all we're doing is trying to restore Kumulipo one step at a time. We make the condition for that animal to return, and then the next one will come, and the next one will come. And it's magnificent because we have evidence of it, how it functions at Pa'ayao. We have to have faith in our ancestral knowledge. That's the way that we go to map out the future. And it's her gift. It doesn't mean it's the only one. Indigenous people, we have similarities. I met a woman who studied ancient Japan, the Jamon people. And she told me that when you go to the forest, at the base of the trees where the spring is emerging from the ground, bubbling out, you find a little temple, a little wooden temple, because the Kani, the god, lives there. I mentioned again the different places where a lot of practitioners go to collect the waters in their springs. It's not just about the physical, it's about our own connection spiritually to these places and really honoring them. And that's what will bring them back. University of Hawaii sits in the most abundant watershed, the biggest ahupua'a. Used to be all Lo'ikalo, right? So much water flowed through there until the introduction of a forest that is not conducive to having water go into the aquifer. We go up there once a month and plant native trees. Simple kind things like that. It can be done so that we have fresh water. So thank you so much for allowing us to bring this message into this family. Yeah. We love you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just I'm humbled by the opportunity to continue to have these conversations, and I just want to say thank you to our guests, Aunty Kehaulani, Kaʻōlinokaimana, Andrew, Ati, for being with us today, as well as our ancestors and our youth who are carrying things together, our village, our ongoing village, for sharing your deep knowledge and stories of resilience, unwavering commitment to, Malama Aina, and reminding us that, of Pu'unawai and the freshwater springs, not just sources of why, but sources of life, healing, connection. They carry ancestral memory, community vision, the work to restore, protect, and to uplift biocultural spaces. It's not just environmental work. It's not a political thing. It's spiritual, it's cultural, it's generational. It's the life that we live in. And if we want to continue in it, how important it is to get involved in these spaces. So may we all find ways to reconnect to land, to water, and to one another. Gotta just talk to each other just a little more to honor the responsibility we each carry in this time of transformation. So as Aunty Kehau and a lot of our kapunas show us, we return to places with humility, purpose. Peace is possible in the land, in the water, and in ourselves. So take care of one another, take care of the Aina, and never forget, the future of Hawaii and of our lands depend on what we choose to protect today. So thank you all. Thank you all so, so much for today. It's been truly, I'm out of work. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Mahalo nui.
Mahalo.
I love you all. Thank you so much,
Mai.
Andrew, Kaʻōlino, and thank you, Jose.